Jackson State walks out of their final Southern Heritage Classic victorious, and the Jada Byers show might have just earned Virginia Union the victory of the year. Oh yeah, it's Locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked on HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means to look at the lower third and follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. And today's episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Sign up for Underdog Fantasy or on UnderdogFantasy.com with the promo code LOCKED ON. That's LOCKEDON, and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. And we're going to start off like we are every single Monday, and that is recapping our game of the week. And this week, it just so happened to be the Southern Heritage Classic between Jackson State and that other TSU up there in Tennessee, right? So y'all know where the allegiance lies. We there. I think that might be our game of the week next week because I'm going to try to be there. I mean, it's up the road. So I'm going to try to be at Texas Southern. But anyway, let's go ahead and keep it where it is today, and that is Tennessee State versus Jackson State, the Southern Heritage Classic, the final Southern Heritage Classic for Jackson State. They already said they're bowing out, they're terminating their contract, and they want no more parts of this. So we'll see what that'll mean for the future and who Tennessee State will be going up against, but it won't be Jackson State. And in this game, it was a true defensive war. It was a defensive slugfest. However you want to phrase it, just understand that these two teams were battling it out, and it wasn't much scoring. So for Jackson State, that's kind of a big-time departure from last week. In last week's game, you're looking at a situation where, okay, yeah, I had 50-some-odd points. Okay, yeah, I scored on defense, but honestly, the offense was the star of the show. It was all about Shedeur Sanders, right? I'm not going to rattle off his stat line. I almost did it, but it was all about Shedeur Sanders. This week, there was no offensive explosion. Matter of fact, they struggled to get the ball into the end zone, only scoring one touchdown. They were able to drive consistently, but they were never able to get the ball into the end zone until the end, and it just so happened that that was the dagger, the play that put this all away. But outside of that, it was absolute war. Now, some people are going to comment that there was some made mistakes on Jackson State's side, and honestly, there's some truth to that. I'm not going to take away from it. However, that being said, those happen every single game. Tennessee State did a good job keeping them out of the end zone, whether that was with bend but don't break defense forcing field goals, or if that was with turnovers or just stops on downs. They did a lot. So the way they were able to do it for the most part was the bend but don't break. However, when you look at Jackson State, they just didn't bend. You're not going to break often if you don't bend, right? They only broke one time, allowing only one scoring drive, and that was a field goal. But for the most part, they were absolutely dominant. And in this defensive war, the way that they were able to dominate was with the pressure. That was their biggest weapon, right? And when I look at Devon Starling, you don't really see it too much in his. He got about 3 yards per carry, I think. And it wasn't a terrible game, but it wasn't the game that it was last week. However, if we're talking about pressure and we're really trying to say who it affected, it was Draylen Ellis. It was the quarterback. And I said that pressure could force him to give up the ball. He was a little loosey-goosey last week. I felt as if he just needed to protect the ball. That was my key to victory for Tennessee State. Well, they protected the ball, and they still ended up getting beat because Jackson State didn't need to force turnovers in order to dominate. That's exactly what they did. And honestly, it didn't feel like they ever got a rhythm the whole game offensively for Tennessee State. Let me just go ahead and read some of these stats about the drives for Tennessee State. They had 4 drives without a first down. So just either 3 and out, and they had one that ended up being 4 plays. It was downs. So they didn't get a first down on that either. They only had 2 drives that were over 3 minutes. One was 3 minutes and some change. One was, I believe, 4 minutes and some change. Those were the first 2 possessions of the game. So if anything, you want to say once Jackson State settled in, they already were dominant. They dominated pretty much the whole game. But once they really settled in, there was absolutely no moving. A bunch of a minute drives, 2-minute drives, less than a minute drives. That showcases the fact that they were never able to sustain momentum, even when they did get a first down. Even when they did have a 6-play drive, it quickly stalled out. And a lot of that was due to the pressure. And then, of course, the biggest thing is the fact that we're talking about points. There's nothing bigger than points. And they only allowed 1 field goal the whole game. The whole game, they only allowed 1 field goal. So a lot of this was the benefit of pressure. A lot of it was. And if we're talking about the running game, Devon Starling, he had a decent game, like I said. However, there was a lot of tackles for a loss. There was 15 tackles for a loss, 15 of them. And a lot of that came in the way of Niles Gaddy, or Gaddy Niles, excuse me. No, I'm sorry, Niles Gaddy. I said it right the first time. It just was written the wrong way. But yeah, Niles Gaddy was getting after it. There was 15 tackles for a loss. There was 8 sacks on the day. He provided 4.5 tackles for a loss. So of that 15, he had nearly a third. And if you're looking at the sacks, he had 8, or he had 4. The team had 8. He had half of their sacks. He was an absolute terror. Draylen Ellis is closing his eyes as we speak, thinking about that. If you know Draylen Ellis, please do not send him, because I don't want him to ever have to hear the name Niles Gaddy again. I don't. So if you know him, don't send him this. And I like Draylen Ellis. We're going to talk a little bit better about Draylen Ellis as we get into the next segment, of course. But they were absolutely dominant on that front. And I don't care who you are. If you cannot protect, if you cannot win the trenches, you're going to have a hard time. And when you lose the trenches in the way that Tennessee State did, you're not getting no offense. These stats were spread around. I know I just said that Gaddy got a lot of it. However, you look at it, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players with sacks. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players with tackles for loss. So it's not as if even Cameron Silman-Craig was getting in there from the defensive backfield. So there were plays that were being made on all 3 levels by these guys. Disruptions. I love tackles for a loss. I love sacks because they are disruptive stats. They're stats that when you look at them, you can point and say, oh, you shook something up. A tackle is a tackle if you're 50 yards downfield, if you're 2 yards downfield. A tackle for a loss is only a tackle for a loss, well, if you lose something. It had to be behind the line of scrimmage. A sack is a sack. Even if it's a coverage sack, you still can easily say, even without context, you force some sort of disruption. So that's why I really love these stats. And if you're really looking for a stat that just hammers home how impactful the pressure and how much that Draylen Ellis was harassed all day, if you're really looking for one of those, I'll give you this. His stat line read 15 carries for negative 68 yards. Negative 68 yards. I think that tells you how uncomfortable he was all day because he never really got a feel for anything. And when he wasn't getting sacked, he was getting hit. When he wasn't getting hit, he was getting pressured. I can probably count on 2 hands how many plays he actually felt comfortable in. And going forward, we're going to be talking about what's next for Tennessee State. We can answer that question conventionally, or we can answer it in the way that I want to answer it. So we're going to hear that as we keep rolling with today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Before I get into that, I want to tell you about Underdog Fantasy because this is the easiest place to spice up your college football season. Emphasis on easy. This is the easiest place to spice up your college football season because you can watch your favorite team play and also do this. Now, when I look at it, the best thing about it is easy, but we can say that a million different times in a million different ways, and that might not really hammer it home. First off, they have always been focused on building the superior products so that you can have the best experience. And what I love is the fact that sometimes things are going to happen. You're going to need some troubleshooting. They have top-notch customer service. I have never had an issue with Underdog Fantasy that I couldn't reach out and get fixed for me quickly. And that's my favorite part about it because look, I know I'm young, But I'm not the greatest with the technology and all of those things. Sometimes I be slipping up, but they're always there to make sure that if I'm not clear on what I need to do, they'll take care of me. So I want you to sign up with the promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. So if you deposit $100, you'll get $100 free. Just go to UnderdogFantasy.com or on the Underdog Fantasy app on the App Store or Google Play. Now that's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Locked On, and get into the football pick'em action for college. As we keep on rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day every day. And today's word of the day is substantive. And first, let's break down what substantive means. And it is important, real, or meaningful. And I want to get into what's next for Tennessee State. Now, of course, we could answer this conventionally, right? What's next for Tennessee State? Middle Tennessee. They got them next week, September 17th. That's the next game. That is the next game for your Tennessee State Tigers, if we wanted to answer it conventional. However, as when I signed out of last segment, I said I don't want to answer this the conventional way. I don't want to be quite literal and say who's the next opponent. No, not this time. What we're going to do is talk about what's next for them to focus on. What's next for Tennessee State is finding a way to finish. That's it. You need to find a way to finish. And the reason that's the most important thing is because, honestly, if things go right for Tennessee State, if things go right, not all the way right, but relatively right, you're probably in this same exact position next Monday, feeling like you went against a, higher competition. If, maybe this is definitely a higher competition, but you might not have felt that way the first 2 weeks. But a higher competition, you played well, you didn't get it done, but you felt like you had some positive attributes that you can take from this game. But eventually that's going to be a terrible pattern to replace or to repeat. You're not going to want to continue to say, oh yeah, we had this and we did this well. No. Sooner or later, you need to win. Sooner or later, you need to win. And it's not just the fact that you're facing high-level competition, because let's be real. They're shooting up. They're shooting up. Right now, Jackson State is the number 13 team in the country. Eastern Washington, which, by the way, has the same mascot as Eastern Michigan. Stupid to me, be honest with you. I just thought that was so simple. I'm like, gosh, y'all couldn't have. Anyway, how y'all both Eastern and y'all got the same mascot? Be better than that. But anywho, maybe that's just something to me. I'm weird, right? So, Eastern Washington, number 12. Tennessee State's not a top 25 team. They never have been. They never have been. Even before this, they were not a top 25 team. They're projected to be fourth in their conference. So they're not a top 25 team. Shooting up and playing these teams the way you did, in a way, can be a confidence builder. And I think you should take it that way if you are a fan. I think you should take it that way if you are a coach, because you can make a legitimate argument that the three toughest games of their season are the first three games of their season. So when you go against Eastern Washington, a team nobody really gave you a chance against, and you take them down to the wire, but you don't get it done. When you go against Jackson State, a team that after your performance in week one, people are starting to say, you know what, you might be able to do something. But let's be real, you're still shooting up. They're number 13 in the country. You take them down, it's not all the way down to the wire, but it's a relatively close game. You just got some things you got to work out. But you have to be feeling a little good about what your defense or how your defense looks. And then you go to Middle Tennessee. Well, now they're a FBS team. Let's just recap it. Let's list off the first three opponents for Tennessee State. Number 12 team in the nation, Eastern Washington. Number 13 team in the nation, Jackson State. And then you have to move up a subdivision to the FBS and play Middle Tennessee. They're likely not going to play a better team than that, and they're definitely not going to play a 3-game stretch like that. They just aren't for the rest of the season. So if you want to say, oh, I feel like we did these things positively against these teams and take away from it, yeah, 100%. But what's next is you have to learn how to finish, because the inconsistencies are concerning. The inconsistency against Eastern Washington on the offensive side is concerning. On defense, you felt like, oh, wow, Jackson State has a really good defense or a really good offense. And we were able to keep them out of the end zone until the very end of the game. Now, I understand they had yards and all of those things, and you don't want that. You don't want all that in between. But at the end of the day, what's most important is the defense stopping you from scoring points, right? I took a little break from the Cowboys Buccaneers game right now. The Cowboys are forcing field goal after field goal after field goal. If that doesn't keep up, just understand I recorded this at the time that was the case. All right? That's what matters. Those are the type of things that keep you in the game. And let's be real. Whether you're a Jackson State fan or you're a Tennessee State fan or you're just somebody who's watching the game, I think we can all agree that Tennessee State's defense played well enough to where their offense could have won them the game. But they just were not better than Jackson State's defense, simple and plain. So when I'm trying to learn how to finish, the number one thing I'm pointing to is Draylen Ellis. And not because he's a bad quarterback. I actually think Draylen Ellis is going to be a really good quarterback this year. He just hasn't been able to put it all together in the first 2 weeks. But I think he's going to be a pretty good quarterback. And there's 2 ways that I'm going to try to get him steady. Because that's what it is. Devon Starling, I think he's going to get right. But Ellis is the thing that's concerning. Number one, secure the pressure. We just went over. He got sacked 8 times, hit countless other times, had other runs for a loss. This guy was getting harassed all day. And no matter how they wanted to do it, they were getting it done. You have to secure the protection. He's not going to be any good if you are not able to do that. Simple and plain. You're not going to be able to do it, right? And then also get to OVC play. Because he comes from Austin Peay. He knows what the OVC is about. That's the beautiful thing about this transfer to me. Is that when you're talking about conference play, there was no acclimation period. You're going to be 5 games in before you get into conference play. And by that point, you're probably already acclimated with your team. The conference opponents would have done best to be able to catch Tennessee State before Ellis really got acclimated because they know what he is. They saw him in Austin Peay. They know what Ellis is. They know that he can be one of the better quarterbacks in the conference. So now you're pairing that with a defense that I thought looked good. They were able to force some turnovers. They were able to get some things done. And an offense that not at its best was able to compete with Eastern Washington. This is a force. It can be a force. When I said they came out looking like a contender, it's because they were able to compete with the number 12 team in the nation. They were they weren't really in the game because the offense couldn't do anything. But you had to feel as if it wasn't a blowout. You could take some good things from the defensive side, and that's going against the number 13 team in the nation. Who knows? By the time things go, and you're going to have Lane, you're going to have, is it Bethune? I think it's Bethune is their homecoming game, week 5. I'm not going to call these tune-up games, but you do have an opportunity to not face a team of the caliber that you are the first 3 weeks of the season. So that's what I need. Get Draylen Ellis steady by securing the protection and just making sure you can get to OVC play where he knows what to do and he knows what to expect in a conference like that. Going forward, we're going to be talking about Virginia Union, who knocked off Valdosta State in what I believe is the victory of the year, and not only right now, but will continue to be that as we go forward in 2022. But before we get into that, let me tell you about LinkedIn, and this is for all of my small businesses. We're getting into Halloween time, so if that's what you do, we're going to be ready for that. We're getting into Thanksgiving. We're getting into Cyber Monday, Black Friday, Christmas. These are the times that small businesses need to be out and ready. But if you're not going to be out and ready, or you can't be out and ready if you do not have the people to work for you. And LinkedIn comes in right here and fills in because they are able to let you create a free job post within minutes on LinkedIn Jobs so you can reach your network. And speaking of which, that network, 810 million people that go looking for a job on a daily basis are there. Also, in addition to that, all you have to do is add your job and use the purple hashtag #HiringFrame so that people can spread the word and they can see that you are hiring. The best thing about LinkedIn is they allow you to contact the people that you want to talk to way faster and no more, I got to sit through 100 people only for 3 to be somebody that I actually feel like fits our company. LinkedIn allows you to reach out to those candidates that you know are a fit and see if, hey, you want to work with us? That's the beautiful part about it. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. And did you know that nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn on a weekly basis? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you making us your first listen of the day every single day. And I believe that Virginia Union just pulled off the victory of the year, knocking off number 2 or 3, depending on what subscription you subscribe to. The number 2-3 team in the nation Valdosta State. When I say this is the victory of the year, I understand it's week 2. You're like, man, can we get some more games played? No. This is not only the best victory thus far, I don't believe that anybody else is going to top this victory for the rest of the year. Sure, there might be more substantive victories because you can have a game, and I'm going to preface it by saying in the regular season, because, of course, a championship game and the stakes around, okay, and you get into the playoffs on the D2, you might have bigger victories than this. Maybe. I'm still not sure it's going to happen then. But if we're talking about the regular season, I don't think anybody has done it yet, and I don't think they will. Unless an FCS team goes and beats an FBS team, I don't think they top in this. You can look at Jackson State and FAMU, and you can say FAMU is one of the best black college football teams in the nation. Okay, that might be true. Maybe. I know a lot of people are questioning it. I still need to see, right? But this isn't about them, so I'm not going to tell you why I need to see, but just know I need to see. But let's go with that assumption right now. Let's just say they are one of the best teams. And Jackson State dog walked them the way they did. You talking about 1 versus 3, 1 versus 2, 2 versus 3, 2 versus whatever, right? These are 2 of the 3 best teams, and they absolutely dog walked them. Made them seem like they were not even in that tier. A phenomenal victory by Jackson State in a revenge tour, as some of the people in the comments so eloquently pointed out to some other listeners in the comments. I'm sorry. That's not better than this game against Virginia Union or Virginia Union versus Valdosta State. It just isn't. Let me remind you who Valdosta State is. They are the team that were the runner-ups in the D2 Super Bowl, the D2 championship last year. This team is the number 3 team in the nation if you go to the American Football Coaches Association. Number 2 if you look at D2football.com. Either way, this is one of the 3 best teams in Division II football. And I'm sorry, but in my opinion, knocking them off is a bigger victory than knocking off a top 3 team in black college football when that team isn't even top 25 in the FCS. Like, this isn't in any way to down black college football or anything like that, but the world is bigger, right? Like, there are, like, we can talk about where we rank amongst ourselves and everything, but when we start talking about everybody and where everybody ranks, Jackson State's the only one that's there. I want to see if Central gets in or anything. But overall, Central had a vote going into week 2. But outside of that, there are no teams in black college football who project to be that on the FCS level. A top 25 team overall. That just is what it is. So if you're asking me, which one am I taking? I'm taking a number 3 team in the nation over the number 3 black college football team in the nation when that team is not even top 25 of all teams. Now, of course, you got to make an equivalence because, and some people are going to be mad if I'm making an equivalence and say that's the reason why they're not the bigger victory. But here, JSU knocked off a team that's in the FCS because they're in the FCS. Union knocked off a team in the D2 ranks because they're in the D2 ranks. Unless somebody jumps up a subdivision, they ain't nobody topping them right now. I'm going to put it just like that, okay? Is what it is. They just knocked off the equivalent of beating North Dakota State. Period. And this was the Jada Byers show. This was absolutely the Jada Byers show because when you're looking at the 300 some odd yards that Union was able to get, almost all of that was from Jada Byers. It genuinely was, right? So they won this game 45-40. They had 391 yards and 6 touchdowns. So they had 45 points, 391 yards, and 6 touchdowns. If you took Byers' contributions away, if you took them away, they will only have 27 points, 2 touchdowns, and the most whopping stat of all, they would only have 85 yards. 85 yards. So when you look at it, of the nearly 400 yards, your running back had 3/4 of them. They had 3/4 of your touchdowns, right? He was absolutely dominant. He did it on the ground. He did it through the air. He had 3 touchdowns on the ground. All that great moments, by the way, to really close out and really bring this game home. He had 1 through the air. It's a reason that Coach Huggins, Coach G, Coach Gerald will say that he's the best running back in college football. And I understand that this game versus Valdosta State doesn't mean nothing if they don't win the CIAA, but man, doggone it, this was a great victory right here. But let's keep rolling. So, because I did call out Coach G on his favoritism. So I just had to give him a little bit of love here. But you look at it, he set his career high in yards. He tied his career high in touchdowns, and he had 283 yards on the ground. 283 yards on the ground, nearly 300 yards. But this is a perfect time to pause the podcast and tell you about how the New Orleans Saints were another benefactor of a classic ATL choke job this Sunday. I got on my Michael Thomas jersey. Let me stand up, let you see it real quick. Okay. Shout out to YouTube. If you see it, you see it. All right. Michael Thomas got my Saints on. Look, it's football season, so you might occasionally hear me do something like this. Apologies. No, I don't really apologize. I don't. I'm going to be acting different. Forgive me, even though I don't apologize. But it is what it is. My boy came back 2 touchdowns. That's not the point right now because Jada Byers had 3 of them things on the ground. He had 1 of them things on the receiving end, and he was absolutely the dominant player. There was no question who the best player on the field was on Saturday. It was Jada Byers for Virginia Union, and he's the reason that they were able to come out with this. Let's talk about his 3 touchdown runs because this is when they were really able to pull away from there. In the late third quarter, they scored a touchdown. That was the start of 21 unanswered points. And they really pulled away in that fourth quarter when they scored another touchdown and then another touchdown. And all 3 of those were Jada Byers rushes. And he also put it into a 3-score game. And because it was a 3-score game, now Valdosta is looking like, man, we got to press. But ultimately, it was not enough. So 3-score game, fourth quarter, they were able to score 2 times. But that's how they wrapped it up because time just ran out. There was not enough time for them to get 3 scores on the board. So Virginia Union just knocked off a top 3 team in the country. Apologies. To me, that is the number 1 victory of the year. I think it will be that way. I don't think anybody will top it. And we'll see if they do. I'll come in and I will acknowledge them. But as of right now, Virginia Union over Valdosta State is the win of the season. And I'm only keeping it at the regular season. Now, I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day every day. And also, we're going to be talking about South Carolina State versus Bethune-Cookman because we did get our second SWAC versus MEAC matchup of the season. And also, I think it was our only HBCU, FCS HBCU versus HBCU matchup. So we're definitely going to detail that on tomorrow's episode. In the meantime, I want you to make sure you are checking out our conference shows like Locked on ACC, Locked on SEC, Locked on Big 12, Pac-12. Locked on Pac-12 actually got our podcast of the week last week. So shout out to our conference shows. We're doing this thing big over here, man. So make sure you guys are checking them out. And in the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, you can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.